Shabbat Shalom, and this is 10 minutes of Torah. Not 5 books of Moses, and not 5 minutes to live by, but 10 minutes of Torah. Now, as usual, I give little hints. Sometimes maybe it's a little bit humorous, what it is and it isn't. And so let's start at the last, what it isn't. It's not 5 minutes to live by. What does 5 minutes to live by mean? Well, when I was growing up, there was only a few television stations, not the hundreds that we have now, of course. And most of them were not all-night affairs. That is to say, they ceased operations around midnight or so. And every night, if you stayed up that late, you would conclude the day with 5 minutes to live by. Some guest speaker would come on and give advice on life and 5 minutes to live by for 5 minutes. Well, I mention that because the word life or living is the title of this Shabbat's Torah portion. Vayechi. You hear the chi, like chai, only it's in a little bit different form. Chi, vayechi, and he lived. And so this Torah portion has the word life, 5 minutes to live by. But I also said it's not the 5 books of Moses because this Shabbat we finished the first book of Moses, Breshit, or Genesis. Although what is interesting is that technically speaking, it's not 5 books of Moses. There's only 4 books of Moses because Moses hasn't appeared yet. He will come next week. Wait, he'll be here. But in the first book of the 5 books of Moses, no Moses. Well, that's why it is not 5 books of Moses. Vayechi begins with mentioning the fact that Jacob's life is coming to an end. It's interesting that the 2 Torah portions in Genesis, in Breshit, that have the word chai in it, speak not about life, but about the end of life. The other one, of course, is Chaye Sarah, the life of Sarah. So both portions speak about these great people in our history who are dying or who have died, but we don't always remember that it isn't just Sarah in Chaye Sarah or Jacob here who no longer are in this world at the end of the Torah portion. In Chaye Sarah, it is bracketed by the death of Abraham at the end of the Torah portion. And so too here, Jacob's death is bracketed by the death of Joseph at the end of the Torah portion. It's only natural, a new generation is coming, and this story has basically ended. But the way Joseph's death is described at the end is very ominous. Let me read from you the last verse of Genesis. It says, Vayamat Yosef ben Mea ve'eser shanim. And Joseph died at the age of 110. V'yechantu oto. And they embalmed him. That's an interesting question. As you might know, embalming is not a part of Jewish practice today. Perhaps they embalmed him because he was also Egyptian royalty, but they embalmed him. And then here is the phrase that is just striking. V'yasem ba'aron b'Mitzrayim. And he was placed in a coffin in Egypt. Now, when you think about it, those words are a bit of foreshadowing. That is, the people of Israel, that's kind of their position. They are stuck in Egypt. They are not yet slaves. They will become slaves next week. But nevertheless, the idea that they're in Egypt and they're in this place that they don't seem to be able to escape from, a little bit of foreshadowing at the end of this week's Torah portion. Let's go back now to Jacob's life and coming death, because I think that the Torah wants to let us know that people, especially those in the Torah, but people in general, teach us throughout their lives and even in their deaths. And that is true of Jacob. Jacob is the very first person who is described in the Torah as getting sick. Of course, other people did get sick. Other people died. People are described as dying. Chaye Sarah. But no one is spoken of as being sick before they died until Jacob. And what's important about that is it teaches us some of the basic principles of what we call Bikur Cholim, visiting the sick. You see, visiting the sick is one of the most important acts that one can ever do. It is a mitzvah, it's a commandment. But how you fulfill that commandment, there are different ways, of course, to do that. We know that visiting someone who is sick, well, it's not going to cure them, but it absolutely does make them feel better. And we see that right here with Joseph when he goes to visit his father when he is sick. First of all, Joseph doesn't go unannounced. And we learn from that when you visit someone who is sick, you let them know ahead of time they're coming, that you are coming rather. The reason for that is that the person may not quite be ready for a visit. What if you want to visit them early in the morning and they're still sleeping? What if they want to, straighten themselves up a bit, look a little bit better, comb their hair, so that they at least have a better appearance for you? You've got to give them some time to do that. What if they want to have specific things to talk to you about and they need some time to think about that? So when you visit someone who is sick, it's good to let them know ahead of time that you're coming to visit. And is it okay to visit? Now, I wouldn't usually take no for an answer. If someone says don't visit, you can say, well, when is a good time? Because oftentimes people are not so ready for you to visit until you tell them that you want to come. And then they realize that it is very important for them for their spiritual health to be visited by others. The second thing that Joseph does in visiting Jacob is that he brings Jacob's grandsons, Ephraim and Manasseh, with him. That too teaches us something about visiting the sick. Bringing children to someone's house who is sick is a good thing to do. Obviously, you don't want them to catch what the person has if it's something that is communicable, but it's often not going to be the case. I mean, it is with COVID now, but that's beside the point. But their visit as a younger generation is something that undoubtedly gives the person who's sick a wonderful feeling. And that's the job of the Bikur Cholim, the one who visits the sick. Not to cure the person, but simply to lift up their spirits. And what could lift up someone's spirits more than bringing young people, especially their grandchildren, to visit them? And so that's what Joseph does. He brings Ephraim and Manasseh, and the Torah tells us that Jacob got up extra strength for this visit. It was so important to him to see Ephraim and Manasseh and to speak with them and to bless them. And so that is the last piece of teaching that this week's Torah portion, I think, tells us about visiting the sick. You should visit them. You should have it announced beforehand so the person knows. You should bring children with you if it is appropriate to do so. And last but not least, you should follow the lead of the person who's sick. Jacob wants to bless his grandchildren. What if Joseph had said, oh, no, this is too much for you. Don't worry about it. They don't need your blessing. No, Joseph is wise enough to allow his father to bless Ephraim and Manasseh. And that feeling undoubtedly gave to Jacob a feeling of wholeness, a feeling of understanding that not only will his children continue after him, but so will the next generation, and they'll do so with a great blessing. This has been 10 minutes of Torah, not 5 books of Moses and not 5 minutes to live by, but 10 minutes of Torah. Shabbat Shalom.